welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, depending on where you are joining us from. We have people from APAC, Africa, the EU, South Central, and North America, so welcome all. Thank you for joining us today for the second session in our 2024 Fundamentals of Sponsorship series. Today's focus is on the data of sponsorship, not only from an evaluation perspective, but from a measurement perspective. Sponsorship is getting a little more mature in terms of data, so we're happy to be part of that journey. I'm happy to talk about data with you today around sponsorship. We do have a lot to get through. We're going to try to move fast without talking fast. As you take notes, don't worry if you miss anything. We're going to share a copy of this presentation within the next 24 hours, so look for that in your email box. We do have the question and answer box open. We will have some time for questions at the end, we hope. If we run out of time, we will certainly follow up with answers to the questions that are posted in the Q&A box. But please share those questions in the Q&A box as we go. And we will do that follow-up. So let's get started. Hello, Jordan.
Hey, Ian. I was just looking for the unmute button there. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. My colleague Joe and Daniel will be my co-presenter today. Joe and I are both proud data nerds and process geeks, so happy to be with you here, Joe, and thanks. In terms of an agenda for today's session, in case you didn't join us last time, you don't know anything about us, we're going to give you a very little bit about us. We're going to talk about data, sponsorship evaluation, the data around that. We're also going to talk about data-driven activation strategy, and we're going to speak about measurement strategies for your sponsorship portfolio. Reminding everyone that this is a brand side only presentation, so only brands are on the call today. So anything here is from the brand lens. So happy to have everyone here. And again, some Q&As at the back end. Now, just a little bit about us. We do work across 21 country markets as well as support global organizations. We do have reps in. Over the last 10 years, we've evaluated over 3,000 different kinds of sponsorships, from sports, arts, culture, cause, community programs, community properties, athletes, entertainers, as well as cross-promotional partnerships. While we are specialized and expert in brand side sponsorship marketing, we intentionally don't work property side. We are full service. We help clients with sponsorship strategy, property evaluation and valuation. We'll talk about that a bit today. Sponsorship operations or governance. We talked about that last day. Measurement, which we'll talk about today, and all things that come in between. We also have a set of software tools that help brand owners with more efficient and more effective sponsorship, including our AI-driven sponsorship proposal management tool, Touchstone, which has just been fully rebuilt as the 4th generation of Touchstone and launched last month. So I mentioned earlier that this is the second in our 3-part series. Session 1 focused on sponsorship operations and governance. If you weren't available to attend for that, please reach out to me and we will send you a recording of that session. Session 3 will be a week from today at the same bat time, same bat channel. That will be the final session, and in that we will focus on all things strategy around sponsorship. Now, from a context set, let's look where sponsorship spending has gone globally over the last number of years. Last year, the spend from a rights fee perspective across all sectors, across all markets, was just under $69 billion USD. As you can see, sponsorship had a rough go through the pandemic with live events and live sports, live entertainment, live music not happening for a better part of 18 months or so. So the trend line heading into 2019 with a flat 2019 over 18 was about a 5% growth year over year for the previous 5 years. And we are thankfully back to about the same level, almost to the dime, in 2023 that we were at in 2018 and 2019. But that said, sponsorship is still relatively unmanaged in many organizations. It's the number 2 spend from a Marcom perspective after media. About 12% of Marcom spend across brands, this is obviously a generalization and an average, is about 12%. but it still remains relatively unmanaged. Sponsorship, for a very good reason, is a very emotionally driven form of marketing pressure. That's why it connects so well with consumers and well as stakeholders and customers. But it also means there's a fair amount of emotion within the organization that drives decisions often. And that could be intent from C-suite executives, people within the organization get excited around sponsorship, but it also impacts the choices that are made. And for a long time, data was sort of looked at as something we didn't want to necessarily shine a light too brightly on, because that might change the direction of the organization against that emotion. Our belief is that the business case approach to sponsorship makes for better sponsorship, more effective and efficient decisions, and you can still have the engagement from your team inside. You can still connect with consumers around that emotional context. From a study that we did with the WFA, our strategic partner, last year, 45% of brands globally still don't have a framework or a model to determine the commercial value of the rights and entitlements they're acquiring. That's fairly staggering, that there is no methodology within almost half of organizations for how the value is determined. We're going to talk about that a little bit today, and I'm going to pass it over to Joanne to get us started.
Thanks, Ian. Hey, everyone. So the first section that we'll be covering today is sponsorship evaluation, a quick 101 on this. So this is the process of assessing the effectiveness, the impact of a sponsorship agreement between a brand and a partner. It involves analyzing how well a program meets its objectives. The objectives could be brand visibility, enhancing corporate image, or driving sales. A quick breakdown of what an evaluation might typically involve is reviewing your objectives first, comparing the outcomes against the initial goals that were set for the partnership. This could be your brand awareness, audience engagement, and even sales figures. Something like performance metrics and the return on investment are other areas that we'd be looking at, and we'll dive into that in detail in upcoming slides. What we also shouldn't ignore is gathering qualitative feedback from various stakeholders, which could be senior leadership or on the ground folks. It could also be your customers, your partners, and the sponsored entity itself. So if we get on to the next slide here, Ian. So needs validation when you think of what is the need for evaluation. So marketers are increasingly facing scrutiny from their executive teams, CFOs, and procurement departments who are demanding clear justification when it comes to marketing investments. So the need to demonstrate not only the value that you're getting from the brand, it's also important to demonstrate the value that the business is getting overall, not just in terms of marketing metrics. So brand managers face the challenge of clearly demonstrating the ROI or any sort of outcome such as brand awareness and sales. Also, attributing any returns back to sponsorships can be a challenge sometimes. So ensuring these elements align with your business goals, is crucial to showcase what a true impact could be for sponsorships. When it comes to sponsorships overall, marketers must now clearly show how their spending is being allocated and how these sponsorships are strategic and effective to achieve measurable brand and commercial goals. Now, what can't be measured cannot be managed. Not knowing the size of and the nature of the beast might mean it might lead to inefficient management. So valuation forms the basis of effective and efficient sponsorship marketing. So valuation and evaluation are slightly different. We'll get into that in upcoming slides. But understanding the efficiency and effectiveness of your marketing pressure has always been important. But to Ian's point, it does carry added weight since coming out of the pandemic. We're seeing that brand teams are now more cautious about how they invest in marketing for an extended period of time, largely due to greater scrutiny. We expect this to continue into the future as new habits within organizations are still being established. Well, sponsorship is recognized as an important way for your brand to create an emotional connection with consumers and demonstrate your brand's value. Validating the spend is more critical than ever. Validating spend and performance of partnerships to prove out investments will enable you as marketers, as brand managers, to develop a plan to even course correct during the term of the partnership and ensure properties and partners will support evolving business and brand objectives. We did speak a little bit about valuation and evaluation. They are similar sounding terms, but there's a slight difference. Valuation provides the number, the single commercial value that a property is worth to your brand. Now, this is based on your brand and commercial objectives, the right fees paid, and what assets you get in return as part of the partnership. Valuation is the cold, hard math that is separated from the software attributes and actual sort of in-market execution. It provides the engine for a more holistic evaluation. Now, evaluation is built upon this singular assignment of value to the partnership, but it takes it further to develop a more comprehensive assessment and examination of the partnership. All in all, an effort to provide a holistic understanding of a property's value to your brand beyond what's on paper to facilitate a clear path forward. Now we'll come back to valuation first and dive a little bit more into evaluation. So what is the importance of valuation? So it is a crucial aspect of effective governance, providing a standardized method for assessing any sort of sponsorship opportunities that come your way into the organization. It lays the foundation for a data-driven, insight-rich evaluation process. Now, armed with a thorough value analysis, decision makers can present a compelling business case to secure organizational alignment and approvals. This sort of proactive approach really streamlines your planning for future acquisitions, future renewals, budget discussions, and just more efficient marketing overall. It also helps in setting a measurement plan and forming a strong negotiation strategy. Right. So this little slide here, it's a little busy, but I'll quickly break this down for you. This is a representation of Lumency's proprietary valuation model, True Value. The methodology establishes the value of a sponsorship's worth, and we break it down into three key asset categories. Margin contribution is one, where the margin of any direct sales revenue delivered through the property is included in part of the overall property value. Now, for a beer company, this could be on-site sales, and any sort of profits or margins that you're getting from on-site sales could also include retail activations. And the second sort of bucket that you're looking at here are more tangible assets, things that you can touch, see, and feel. This could be on-site presence, any sort of consumer engagement opportunities, in-camera visible assets during a broadcast, any sort of advertising that's included or done, executed by the property itself. So a few different sort of components here. And then intangible assets, it is determined as a function of the tangible asset value. Now, this is things that are not obvious or apparent. This could be prestige of the property that's driving intangible value, the level of interest of the audience in the property itself, the sport itself, or whatever entertainment category it might be. What's the level of category exclusivity that the partner provides to you as a sponsor, any sort of pass-through rights that you achieve. So again, all three components are important when it comes to looking at the total value that a property delivers. True Value is based on 25 plus years of proven effectiveness. It's battle tested. It's very detailed, drives high visibility for all areas of a partnership, and also takes into account the qualitative elements of large partnerships. All right. Now, evaluation is built upon the singular assignment of value. We did speak about that a couple of slides ago, but evaluation takes it further to deliver a far more comprehensive assessment and examination. So evaluation is the delivery of sound. It depends on strategic insights, any sort of recommendations, negotiation strategies that are born out of the quantitative evaluation process. Three core areas that are typically part of an evaluation would be an in-depth analysis, like I said a few seconds ago, just providing more sound insights, recommendations, looking into actual data that a partner might provide or any sort of third party that you might engage, with the intention of making informed decisions where you have consistent decision making across your portfolio for however complex the deal may be. And the ultimate goal of an evaluation is providing a holistic understanding of what a property's value is to your brand. At Lumency, we take it a step further when it comes to holistic evaluations. We look at a few more things, and our evaluations typically include sponsorship strategy mapping. What I mean by that is aligning your sponsorship activities with broader business goals. to ensure all efforts support strategic objectives and you maximize and optimize the effectiveness that a partnership brings to you. Aligning authenticity, so ensuring the sponsorship property matches your brand's value and identity. Inauthentic partnerships might not deliver as much value as a really authentic one. And then activation optimization, where you look at activations that are executed as part of the sponsorship and focusing on engaging the right target audience in the right way, having the right messaging and positioning to activate correctly. Well, evaluations can also have recommendations on how you could potentially restructure a deal. So if an existing agreement, you're not seeing the results that you would want midway or at some point during the course of the agreement, you could also tweak the deal itself in terms of looking for assets or asset mixes that deliver more value to the partnership itself. And then lastly, what we also include would be tailored insights. So as a brand, depending on your category, on your objectives and goals as an organization, having customized recommendations and evaluations are critical. So that's again an element that we typically include in evaluations. Now we get into data-driven activation strategy. As we said, over the past couple of decades or so, data is playing a far more important role when it comes to how you activate and how you sort of align that with your overall strategy when it comes to sponsorships and your organization as a whole. So enabling data-driven decision-making would be key. So working with your property partners to set up the right partnership infrastructure is step one. Now, this could be creating customer databases, capturing customer data, any sort of campaign management tools, and building internal capabilities and teams that are equipped to work and maximize the value that a sponsorship can deliver to you. The example here shows a pathway of how there are 3 steps essentially. Now, this is a 10,000-foot view, but there could be more layers to this. It shows a pathway of the overarching steps and milestones involved in activating a data-driven sponsorship. This would typically necessitate close collaboration between the sponsor and the property. Investments in technology and innovative approaches, such as new entertainment concepts and interactive events, can further enhance fan experiences and attract greater media and sponsor interest. Now, the last step would be to measure and report performance with KPIs. Like we covered earlier, if you don't measure, it becomes extremely difficult to manage. So identifying those top performing activations, those assets, and then further tailoring customer journeys and experiences in the future would be step 3.
I'm going to jump in and just sort of take us back and think about what are the principles of activation design and using data to drive those. This is our first principles. Feel free to take this away and use it or enhance it. We're going to go left to right, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but important to sort of think about the overall strategic approach to activation design. And from left to right, top to bottom, first would be the emotional connection between your consumer and the property is likely and possibly more stronger than the emotional connection between that consumer and your brand, and being able to leverage the associated benefits and the borrowed imagery that you get with your sponsorship investments. It's important to think about always putting the consumer first and putting the property out front with your brand, not in the far background, but really telling the stories about the property to their fan base and their audience in a way that enables you to get attribution for that storytelling and association recognition from that fan base or that consumer set. And obviously making sure, I say obviously, but maybe not obviously, is making sure that the activation is aligned to your brand. Does it make sense to you to be in that space telling that story with that activation? Is that making sense from a brand equity perspective? The next is always focusing on enhancing the experience and not interrupting it. If you think about the idea of walking along a concourse and someone jumping out and asking you to sign up for something when you're on your way to your seat at a game, your mindset is in a celebration, relaxation, bonding mindset, and the appropriateness of that advanced by the brand probably doesn't do your brand any favors if you're in the wrong space doing the wrong activation. Always think about being of service to the fan and how are you addressing pain points in how they consume and connect with that property. That doesn't mean as simple as how do you make parking better, but if you're a brand that has a focus on families, how do you make the family experience or the experience for families around that property better? Important, so you do get that attribution, that association, and that points for being there, is creating ownable space that your brand owns alone, be that physical, social, or digital. It's also important, going down left to right from the bottom now, is showing up as a super fan, demonstrating that you believe what the fan believes. You believe in the property, you believe in the music, you believe in the sport, and that you're always demonstrating that as a fan. Your brand is also a fan. Next, building and owning relevant and magnetic content that may live on your channels, may live on the property's channels, but being able to tell the story and have the property's demonstration points for your brand values is quite important. When you're thinking about activation, be it live or digital or social, is there a compelling opportunity for the fan to engage with that content, engage with that activation, participate in your brand's execution of the sponsorship? And then lastly, we're going to talk about this on the next slide, but the notion of omni-channel activation plans, making sure you're sweating the property across all of your connection touch points. So let's stop here for a moment. This is what we call the 360-degree activation wheel. It doesn't mean all of your properties can be leveraged across all of these connection points. Your brand, your organization may have more connection points than these. This is an example. But part of your mission should be, how are you ensuring that to the fullest extent possible, that sponsorship, its activation, is being spread across that activation wheel to the fullest extent possible, to repeat myself. But a national or global sponsorship might require all of those touch points to be hit. A more local or regional sponsorship may not require that, maybe 110 degrees or 290 degrees, whatever that might be from a wheel perspective. But ensuring you're thinking about, how is this going to come to life in our social channels? How are we engaging our employees around this sponsorship? How are we integrating our CSR partnerships into the sponsorship where appropriate? How are we thinking about hospitality and experiences? Jordan?
Right. Thanks, Ian. So at the beginning of this section, we talked about setting up the right infrastructure and how to set yourself up for success. How can you convert that or modify that into an ongoing data-driven sponsorship strategy? So this could be year-on-year evaluation or analysis or reviews, whatever you may call it. But a step one would essentially be collecting data. So gathering data from various sources, such as social media interactions, the CRM databases, any engagement metrics that you see from digital or social platforms. Fan surveys are a really critical component when it comes to measuring brand impact, and any sort of sponsorship performance indicators, which could be broadcast viewership, in-stadium attendance. All of those are data points that will really help you build an ongoing strategy. Now, step two would be analyzing these insights. So analyze your customer data to understand your audience behavior. Do they have specific preferences? Are there any patterns that you're seeing with their engagement? And this helps in tailoring any sort of future activations that can resonate more with the target demographic or the audience that you're looking to activate. Tracking performance and KPIs such as brand visibility, again, audience engagement, any return on investment would again be a step three. This helps in evaluating the effectiveness of the sponsorship and making necessary adjustments over the course of the partnership term. Step four would be personalizing your experiences. So you've collected data, analyzed your audience, you've tracked the important metrics that you need to track, but using data to create personalized and relevant experiences are again a crucial aspect when it comes to activating currently. Now, this can include targeted promotions, what really matters to your consumers, building any sort of customized content that draws audiences to any sort of branded content that you're building. Or interactive elements that can really enhance engagement in an effective way. Optimizing strategy is a little different from personalizing experiences, where you're continuously refining your strategy based on data insights. And this could be at a portfolio level and not necessarily dedicated to one property. This involves tweaking campaigns. Are there any sort of efficiencies that you can build with how your portfolio or your properties within your portfolio complement each other? Reallocating resources, experimenting with newer approaches to maximize impact is another way. Technology is obviously evolving, and even since the pandemic, we've seen how the landscape and ecosystem has changed. So staying on top of any developments in the industry in terms of infrastructure and tech is also a key part of optimizing strategies. And number 6 would be reporting your results. Now, providing detailed draft or recap reports from a partner perspective, and you as a brand manager or a marketer gathering that from your property partner is again really important. This is important to showcase the success of how the sponsorship was activated, and all of this is obviously data driven. This helps in demonstrating the value of the sponsorship to stakeholders internally and externally, and again helps justify any future investments that you want to make in the space. If you're looking for higher budgets to activate right in an upcoming season or an upcoming year, all of these steps and finally reporting these results in an efficient way to stakeholders would really help drive that push.
Thanks, Rowan. Can you just give me a bit of a mic check? Am I good? Can you give me a bit of a mic check, Joe?
Hi, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you. There's a bit of a poltergeist going on here. Let's move on to the data around measurement. From the study we did across global sponsors last year with our partner, the WFA, there's a real bell curve in terms of how brands are looking at measurement. Fully 24-25% aren't measuring their sponsorships at all. And on the top end of the curve, about 25% are spending 1% or less of their overall sponsorship budget on measurement. Our recommendation to our clients is to be spending about 1.5% of your overall sponsorship budget, which will include activation and rights fees on measurement, because if we don't have a light going forward to understand how our sponsors are performing, we can't really be accountable to our leadership and our funders and our shareholders in terms of how we're leveraging our investment of scarce resources. So I just talked about this slide. So 25% are spending none, 53% are spending 1% or less. So really there's a relatively small share of sponsors that are really committed to measurement. The reasons we hear back, and this came back in the study, was brands don't know how to measure. So that was hopefully an easy solve, and hopefully we can address some of that here today. Brands also are concerned that it's too expensive or takes too long. That's a reasonably legitimate concern. And the third would be they just don't have the time or the resources to do it, which is not a great answer. But those tend to be the top 3 reasons why sponsors aren't spending, and that 25% are spending none. The unfortunate solution, and that's why there's some complexity around measurement, is there really isn't an easy solution. There isn't an out-of-the-box, one-size-fits-all way to measure sponsorship. Therefore, a bespoke solution is necessary. And the proclivity of many sponsors is that we need to measure everything that moves. And our heretical belief is that's not the case. By industry sector, this 2 or 3 or 4 different industry sectors from a category perspective sponsoring the same property will want to measure those sponsorships differently. That's because different categories have different needs around measurement, or different needs around the business model to fuel measurement. So these are 3 industries that we spend a fair amount of time working in. Automotive, we tend to focus on brand health, shopping behavior. Are consumers going to websites, doing build-in prices? Are they going to dealerships? Are they doing test drives? And then the ability to farm hot and warm leads. So that's automotive industry. From a telco perspective, looking for brand health, again, this is pretty consistent across all categories. But then also because of the high churn nature of telco, can we impact churn, but can we also impact the likelihood for a consumer to recommend their carrier to someone else that is trusted and known to them? And then telco tends to be their attribution for community investment, or being seen as being a strong community partner, community investor, is important as a way of differentiating that particular category to impact top of mind awareness, but also consideration. And then lastly, beverage alcohol, brand health again, but also are we being target efficient? And if we're not, there should be a guardrail. We've talked about this last day when we were talking about sponsorship governance. In beverage alcohol, there should be a guardrail. If less than a certain percentage of the consumers are not legal drinking age and over, we probably shouldn't be there. We also want to understand lower funnel activity. Are people actually going and shopping us because of the connection to that partnership? And then last, how is our trade activity performing? And this would be the same outside beverage alcohol for any consumer package because it has a trade element that's retail related, is how is our trade activity performing when we're using the sponsorship as content for that trade activity. Now let's make sure we're differentiating between ROI, which we're measuring, and deal efficiency, because we do find when we're talking to a new potential client at Lumency, there is sometimes a confusion. Deal efficiency is what did you get for what you spend? Joan talked earlier about the commercial rights, the category rights of that deal. If you spent €1 for that deal and you got a €1.30 worth of value back, that's deal efficiency, that €0.3. That isn't ROI. ROI is what's the measurable impact that the sponsorship is making on your business, both from a brand perspective, brand health, but also a commercial perspective. And you think across the sales and marketing funnel, not all sponsorships hit all layers of that funnel. Fortunately, with sponsorship, it can hit multiple layers of that funnel, but how is that performing against funnel activity? Consideration, attribution, referability, purchase, shopping, that sort of thing. So here's our fairly simple formula for sponsorship return on investment, as we call it. We're only going to click in on a couple of these today, given the time available, but there are 4 components. The first is return on equity. How is this sponsorship and the activation around it impacting the brand health, whatever that brand health measure is, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. The next, we talk about deal efficiency. That is a contributor to our measurement formula. How efficient are we being in terms of value proposition? What are we getting for what we're spending? And a big component of that is making sure we have the right assets, we're in front of the right consumer audience or the right stakeholder audience, and we're spending the right amount of dollars, euros, yen, whatever that might be for that deal. The next we won't click on here today, but fairly self-explanatory. What is the direct revenue, more particularly what's the direct margin contribution, indirect margin contribution that we're getting from all of the promotional activity, all of the offer activity that we're doing around that particular sponsorship. And then the last one we'll talk about, we won't talk about today, but is return on activation. And in simple terms, is our social performance better when we're using our sponsorships as the content for that social activity versus when we're talking about offers, when we're talking about features and benefits of our product or service. In our experience, it far outperforms social activity that isn't, as one example. Same for trade promotion. If we're doing a packaging play, if we're in CPG, where our sponsorship is integrated into that packaging, are we seeing a lift in sales, and we're seeing a lift in things moving off shelves? So let's spend a bit of time talking about return on equity. So when we're looking at brand health measurement in our approach, we are looking at exactly these number of things. So first, what is the target efficiency we are getting from that property? Is there a high concentration? Are we fishing where the fish are? Is there a high concentration of not only our customers, but our target customers or our target consumers? And we find that in good measure there. How well is the brand opinion performing from that sponsorship's fan base, the community around that sponsorship, relative to the benchmarks we've established when we're looking at brand health across our business with just general population and consumers? And what is opinion tracking against, but also are consumers getting the messaging, the key messaging that we're looking to display there? Next would be funnel activity. So I mentioned this in the previous slide. If our intended objective for the sponsorship is to create stronger awareness, that doesn't tend to be the issue for brands that have strong awareness. If we're looking to increase likelihood to consider, if we're looking to increase shopping, how is that performing against that fan base, that community around that particular sponsorship versus our benchmarks across our business? The next thing we look at is what is the property health of the property itself as a brand unto itself? Is there a momentum behind that particular passion point? Is there a good amount of water boiling in the fandom around that particular property? In the US market, consider North American market broadly, consider MLS soccer that has momentum behind it. It's growing fan base. It's got a strong connection between its fans and its properties, being its teams and its league overall. Major League Baseball is doing quite the opposite. It's got declining momentum. They're losing fans as, unfortunately, fans die, and they're not recruiting younger consumers into the fan base. So that would be two fairly extreme examples. Next would be, what is the level of fandom within that particular property? And we think about fandom in really four levels, as we indicated here, but the bottom level would be avid. The next would be engaged. The next above that would be interested, and above that would be a non-fan. Fans are categorized into those categories by the way they behave and interact with the property itself. In the sports context, an avid fan would be buying merch. They would have season tickets. Perhaps they would be watching every game. The room in their basement where they watch sports might be dressed in the team colors. They may have the plate protector on the front of their car with the property around it. So those are avid fans. And what we do know is avid fans are more likely to recognize we're there and more likely to reward us for being there as brands, because they feel that we are being there, we are there supporting the property that they have that strong engagement with. The next is just how well is our sponsorship performing, particularly around our activation. So what we are measuring here is, in example terms, if we have 10 or 7 or 8 different activations across that connections mix that we talked about earlier, how are each of those performing? And is there a declining benefit or a declining contribution for some of those activations, so that when we do go back, as Joanne mentioned earlier, and adjust our strategy, let's take investment out of activations that aren't working and invest more in activations that are working. The next would be just fit, and are the messages that we look to convey to our consumers, to our stakeholders, to our customers as a brand, are those breaking through and resonating? And do consumers, fans, people in the community around that property think we belong there? Is there a fit alliance? And do they feel, if they feel we belong there, they're more likely to accept us? And the last one here is share a voice, because once we're into a property, there certainly are properties where we are not exclusive in terms of rights. We may have a competitor inside the property, but assuming it's a property where we are exclusive, our competitors are no longer our category competitors. Our competitors are the other sponsors in the property. And the lift around good activation design is making sure that we're capturing a good share or a positive share of voice versus those other sponsors, because there's only so much share of voice to go around. There's only so much attention and mind space that the audience, the fan base, the community around that partnership will give all of the sponsors. We want to make sure we're getting more than our fair share, and particularly more than our fair share that we're paying for. Sorry, just get my screen going here. Next would be, here's sort of the key measurement areas. Some of this came through in the slide we just talked to, but if we're looking at how we explain measurement and getting alignment to measurement within the community, or within the organization and the people funding it across the stakeholder group within the organization, we want to make sure we're measuring exposure and reach, not only from a integration of assets within the sponsorship that are delivering awareness and connection, but are they overperforming against what we expected we were buying? So media reach, exposure, and impressions, that matters a little bit. If you're a brand that doesn't have an awareness problem, it matters a lot. If you're a brand that has an awareness problem and is looking to address that from a funnel perspective. We're also looking at the reach from digital engagement and on-site engagement, be that digital and social, whether that be within our own channels or within the properties, and then on-site engagement. The next we talked about in the previous slide is just how is this impacting brand and perception. And going to the next one, are we getting a margin contribution that we're happy with from a direct and indirect revenue perspective and in terms of short-term ROI? And are we generating leads and converting fans, people in the community around that property, to customers? And then the last one is making sure we're activating effectively and testing that and proving that out from a measurement perspective, and then taking that data and adjusting our approach, particularly if we're in a multi-year sports deal, as an example. How are we making sure we take the learnings from year 1 and impact year 2, year 3, year 4, and onwards in a way that's meaningful? Joanne, I'm going to ask you to talk about this last slide, because this is one of your pieces, and then you're going to take us home.
Yeah. So here's a quick example of what a reporting scorecard could look like. This is a one-page summary, especially useful when you're looking to communicate a a property's performance to upstream to senior leadership or executives. So all the important numbers, all the important figures of how a partnership performed on one page essentially. So as you can see, we've also included some rows. This was custom built for a client. As you can see, we included rows that sort of benchmarks to performance from previous years. And some of the key metrics that we're seeing here would be the total value that the property delivered to a sponsor. What is the cost involved? This could include activation fees as well, and the rights fee at an annual basis. What's the value to cost ratio? Are you getting a one-to-one return, or is there a 2-to-1 return, which could be more efficient? Again, depends on category, again, depends on the type of partnership and the type of sponsorship. Activation to rights is again a key metric which sort of speaks to you're paying a certain amount to get the rights to the property, but how much are you spending to activate and maximize the rights that you're getting? So again, a quick sort of ratio to give an understanding of what is spent upfront and what might be spent at an ongoing level. And a few other metrics that we include here would be media spend, how much of the assets that were delivered to you by the partner are being utilized. So if you have a set of marketing assets, a set of broadcast assets, a set of on-site assets, how many of those assets were effectively utilized? And again, this could provide some direction as to how can you maximize the return that you're getting from a partnership. Digital impressions are again a quick way to sort of see any sort of reach that you get on a digital level. And the last 3 columns on the right that we have speaks to brand impact, any sort of consumer sentiment that is being impacted and can be attributed back to the partnership. So is there an actual cut through even happening? Sponsor awareness would be how many consumers or what percentage of consumers can recall brand X being a sponsor of a certain property. Brand health could mean multiple things. It could mean favorability. It could mean consideration for an automotive. It could be booking of test drives. So that really varies by brand, by category. And the last piece would be purchase consideration, which is a key important metric when you want to track how much of a consumer perception have you shifted? Are they more open to buying your brand because of your partnership or sponsorship of a certain property? So a quick summary of how things can travel upstream effectively, because because having a 30 to 40 slide presentation going up to leadership might not always be the most efficient way. So having a quick snapshot of just the performance, super important. And a little further below, we talk about the value breakout. So there are multiple categories that can deliver value to you as a brand. So getting a quick understanding of where that value is coming from is again key and can really inform your activation strategy going forward. And a few sort of placeholders on key elements of the partnership that can call out. Was there anything that was an anomaly or something that happened during the previous season that you really want to call out here? Just including some templates here. So this is, again, a quick sort of template that we built. We'll share this as part of the presentation that we'll send later today or in the next 24 hours.
Yeah, Joe, and just to call it the simplicity of this approach into this one slide, there's lots of work and effort that goes behind getting this data together. It enables you to consistently look across your portfolio against scorecards that are consistently reported. And it also enables you to dial in to say, let's look at all of our music properties across all markets. Let's look at all of our football properties across all markets so you can get benchmarking against what good looks like. And when we do hear from sponsors, and we mentioned this in the earlier discussion around why aren't they measuring or why aren't they putting more into measurement, there is that notion of we can't figure it out, it's complex, and it can be scary to try and get to the top of the mountain in one quick climb. But think about crawl, walk, run, sprint. And if you're not doing anything right now, what can you be doing to get you closer, and maybe set out a 2 or 3 year plan to get to fully bright? Given if you're starting from zero, that's an okay place to start. You know where you're at, and you may know where you want to get to, but what's the plan to get there in a way that gets the organization aligned as you take that journey and you hold hands and do that together. And then the other point here just to call out would be the distinction between outputs and outcomes. Often outputs are intermediary measures that would be things like how many people went to the game, if it's a sports context, what was the broadcast viewership like, what was the social engagement look like, how many leads did we gain. That's important to count, but that's not really a measurement, because outputs are those intermediary measures that come through your sponsorships. Outcomes is what actually happened to our brand and our business because of that sponsorship and the activation around it. If you're just doing output counting now and you think that's measurement, sorry, that is not, because you're not able to then share back to the business what you're doing in terms of how you're impacting the business. But those things are important to count. And if your crawl phase of getting to a better view of measurement is let's start counting the outputs, that's an okay place to start.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to the final few slides of this presentation and webinar. Thank you for joining us. So we will share this presentation along with a sponsorship glossary that we built at Lumency, which includes the key terms that are part of a sponsorship engagement. So we'll share that along with the presentation, and also the future of sponsorship, which is a study that we conducted, I think, a little over a year ago. Some pieces of that data was part of this presentation, but the full presentation itself we will share in the next 24 hours or so.
Yeah, and Drowan, just while you're getting to the next slide, if you have questions, please load them in the Q&A box. I see there's a few in there already, and as Drowan goes to the final couple of slides, I will monitor that box.
Great, thanks, Ian. So as a thank you for joining us today, what we're offering to attendees and participants is 30 minutes of consulting time just for being part of this webinar. No cost, no obligation, no expectations. Sit down with you, we'll have a conversation about how you are working with sponsorships or how you can activate and engage in sponsorships into the future. Again, we'll sit down with you, we'll provide some insights, a quick review of what you're doing and how we can help, or how you can maximize your partnerships and sponsorships. More in the series. So we had sponsorship operations last week. We covered data today, and next week we'll be doing sponsorship strategy. Key topics of this presentation would be how you can align your partnership strategy, your sponsorship strategy with overarching business objectives. How can you build a synergy with existing practices, and how can you develop some KPIs that you can measure and track and optimize over time. Thank you. So we will dive into questions.
Yeah, and Drowan, we're on the minute, 50 minutes after the hour. That was our plan. That did not work out in rehearsal, but so we are on the minute. So we have a few questions in the chat here. I'll throw the first one to you, Drowan, and I can chime in. How can we evaluate global sponsorships that are larger than just single country market sponsorships?
Yes. So as a brand, your objectives and your goals may vary from market to market or region. So firstly, understanding your objectives and aligning your strategy in each market is key. And what we saw, that a key topic that will be part of a strategy webinar will be developing those KPIs. So what are your KPIs for each country, and how can you measure and track those KPIs in each country? Because your goals would vary. In a certain market, you might be the dominant brand, significant market share, but if you're entering a new market, you're the challenger. So there might be a different strategy that you would want to sort of activate there. And what are those KPIs that would be reflective of your performance there? So just understanding those KPIs and measuring those would be key to get a global sort of ROI or SROI, as you would say.
I think it's important to assess contribution and assess support before you go out and acquire the global sponsorship, if it's something new or if it's a renewal, because often the global sponsorship people, be it marketing, procurement, or sponsorship managers, become politicians needing to go and sell the belief and the dream in supporting a sponsorship, be it from an activation investment perspective locally or from a contribution overall budget envelope. And without that discussion and alignment first, it can be challenging to go and try and sell that afterwards. Next question, what are some new sponsorship assets that have emerged in the last 3 to 5 years? The last 3 to 5 years was filled with pandemic-y stuff. And what we had good success with, because we had sound sponsorship agreements going into the pandemic with reasonably good force majeure language and reasonably good language around what are the make goods if something can't be delivered, like if there's no play, for example, in the sports context. So we were able to get to the table fairly quickly on behalf of our clients and get make goods and new assets in play. But it also overall created a new sense of innovation from our property partners and also from our sponsor brands and from us. And how do we make new assets that never existed before that are virtual in nature? And that meant that there's more opportunity to connect with fans and the community around the particular sponsorship. But it also meant that from a property perspective, they had more to sell. They had more opportunities to give value to their sponsors. So that's sort of my blanket comment there. But if we think about virtual, that's sort of trailed off a bit. I think after pandemic and sitting in our basements for a number of years, we really crave as humans that connection and that live experience. So we've seen a big drop off, even in the music festival context, of people dialing in for live streaming of a festival that they can't attend live, because live has really still maintained strength coming out of the pandemic. But if we think, so that's virtual, that hasn't necessarily stood up as well. But if we just think about the expansion of social, the metaverse also hasn't stood up as we all expected it might, but there's new ways of properties creating social assets, in particular around content. They've gotten much more sophisticated in offering us opportunities that are content where we can create ownable space for our client brands. Anything to add there, Drummond?
I think maybe just one thing where we've seen data as an asset come up. So when we look at a brand's customer database and a property's fan database, there is infrastructure and technology now where you can merge the two in a clean room environment where there's no invasion of privacy, there's no PII data that's being affected. Just understanding the overlap of a brand's customer base and a property's fan base, what's the incremental gain that you're getting by engaging with the property? That's something that's really come up over the past 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, great point. And we like to say, you and I as data nerds, that data is the most important asset after IP rights that you gain in your sponsorship. It's not the signage, it's not the tickets, it's not other assets, the data asset, particularly in a more cookieless world where being able to access and connect with consumers to permission themselves over to our database from a properties database is really critical, because we already have some trust there built. The consumers are more likely to want to step over, which is great. Next question: are music and sport sponsorships evaluated the same way, and how are they different?
I think one important sort of distinction here is, to your point, Ian, during the pandemic, we did see live streams really emerge and see high engagement there. But the last couple of years or so, we're seeing ticket sales for music festivals hit record highs. So more of an on-site element when it comes to music festivals. There are activation areas. You have 3 days of your audience on site at times, but when you look at something like sport, it's about a 2 to 3 hour window where you have attendees on site. Sport sponsorships from what we've seen in the past can also be broadcast heavy. Music festivals are more experiential in nature, where you have people on site. So that's a pretty important distinction, and that can really play to how you activate those sponsorships. So when you're evaluating a music property, on-site activations are a big factor of how you influence consumer sentiment of your brand.
And we believe if you don't have a music strategy within your sponsor portfolio, you don't have a Gen Z strategy. Gen Z is consuming sports differently than millennials before them did, and they're not as engaged in sport as they are in music. And the challenge with music is you're often sponsoring genres rather than unique festivals or events. And if the product on the stage doesn't match the interest of the fan, you're not going to necessarily get the same benefits if there's some other product on the stage. So certainly music festivals have been able to build brands. Think of Lollapalooza, which would be quite unique, in fact, just in terms of the longevity of that festival. But generally speaking, we see music festivals having sometimes a 3, 5, 7 year shelf life where they can come and go. So if your music strategy isn't platform based, meaning what is the conversation you're having with Gen Z and others through music, it's going to be more difficult to connect with those fans consistently, because that festival brand comes and goes. and a particular festival can succeed or fail in a particular year based on the quality of the product on the stage. So it's a less concrete version of sponsorship than we might consider when we're thinking about professional sports as a comparison. Next question in the Q&A box: can influencer partnerships be evaluated the same way as sponsorships? We do have an approach to influencer, athlete, entertainer partnerships. It is an evaluation model, that's built off of our base methodology. It is different because I'll talk about entertainers and athletes specifically. Entertainers and athletes have a particular, sorry, let me take one step back. Going back to Gen Z, Gen Z is more likely to follow an entertainer or an athlete than they are to follow the team or the festival or the music experience that athlete or entertainer is participating in. The necessity of that fan portability that Gen Z brings to their fandom is important, but the fan also looks at the entertainer or sports or athlete rather, not only from what's their performance on the field, on the stage, on the court, but also what's their social statement, what's their fashion statement, what's their music statement, what's their lifestyle statement, and that's that sense of stronger connection that's made. And when we're looking at a number of entertainers, DJs, for example, that we might be looking to sponsor on behalf of a brand, we're looking at what's the relativity on their reach from a social perspective, what's the quality of their character, and how are we comparing one against the other in terms of what we should spend. It's not quite the same as measuring the value of assets that come with a more traditional sponsorship. It's often a relative value against other options in the marketplace. And athletes and entertainers are more flexible for brands because they're often campaign-based rather than long-term relationship-based. So with a minute to go until the top of the hour, we'll make sure we finish on time. We hopefully started on time. Thank you everyone for participating today and joining us. Please join us next Wednesday at the same time and place for our next session on fundamentals of sponsorship. Joe, thanks. Great to be with you this morning. I will see you at the other side of the building shortly, but thanks for co-presenting with me. It's been great.
Thanks all for joining.
Great. Bye, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Okay.